Hi, welcome to ADEX Pixel Virtual Expo, and today for yet another session of In Conversation with David Stride, uh, deeper into the darkness with our special guest, of course, Rod McDonald. So Rod, how about a little wave from Rod?
Hello, guys. Here in
Okay.
Scotland,
Oh yes.
-1 overnight.
Yes, that's right. So before we start that off, let me just introduce our moderator. Today, of course, every bi-weekly is Mr. Strikey or David Stride, as everybody know him as. And Strikey is actually the ADEX ambassador for technical diving. And also today we have the special honor of having Rod McDonald again from Scotland. I'm sure it's really early in the morning at the moment. And Rod is actually a technical diver and an international renowned shipwreck explorer, undersea adventurer, and also a best-selling diving author of not one but 11 books to date. And some of these books are called Dive Scapa Flow and, of course, Dive Truck Lagoon. These beautifully illustrated dive guides to such world-famous dive destinations are the international accepted definitive dive guides. So Rod is actually born in Elgin, Scotland, where he graduated as a Scots lawyer from the University of Aberdeen and practiced law for many, many years before he decided to leave law to concentrate a little bit more on the sea. So Rod is actually a fellow of the Explorer Club of New York and also one of the patrons of the Great Britain and Ireland chapter of the Explorers Club. A closed circuit mixed gas breather diver, Rod has located many virgin deep water wrecks of his coastline and been the first to visit and survey them. Hence, this has brought much contact with survivors and also relatives. Rod served as a lifeboat crew in his local seaside town of Stonehaven in Scotland for many years before being appointed the RNLI operations manager running the lifeboat station. He is currently a search and rescue instructor for the Dutch KNRM lifeboat service. Herewith, let's not wait any longer. I would then pass over to David Stride to continue with the whole session. David, over to you.
Thank you, Nora. And Rod, it's really is good to see you again after sort of a number of years since we last sort of caught up and spoke. Just continuing, the bit that fascinated me, what do you do for the Dutch lifeboat?
Oh, I see. I'm a sort of maritime search and rescue instructor. So the Dutch lifeboat service, they don't have their own training facility in Holland the same way that RNLI have got a training facility down in England. So basically they use my town of Stonehaven, where there's a wonderful setup with a company called Survitec, and they have a lifeboat training academy there. So the Dutch lifeboat crew are on probation for essentially 3 years in Holland. But at the end of the 3 years, they get sent across to Scotland, where myself and Paul Haynes put them through their paces for a week-long course and basically beast them. And they come as boys and girls and they leave as men and women.
Paul would be good at that.
Oh, he is. We're like yin and yang, you know. If somebody's to get a bit of a bollocking, Paul does that. If they need a big hug, I do the hugging.
So do you get called out for the benefit of people that might not know? Rod is, of course, from Scotland. From what's
Stonehaven. Stonehaven.
Stonehaven, and
yeah,
that's near where? Rod?
Sorry.
That's near where?
It's just South Aberdeen in the northeast, the sort of top right part of the northeast of Scotland.
Right. And you said that the weather there at the moment was cold and snow flurry.
Well, it is Scotland, so it was -1 overnight, and there's just been the first flurry of snow over here. but there's snow in the hills already. So I'm keen to get up next week,
Right.
hopefully, to get into the hills.
Do you get called out much for rescues with the lifeboat service?
Well, I'm not active crew. I left the RNLI 3 or 4 years ago. But I was crew for about 7 years, at lifeboat crew in St Haven. And we used to get probably about 15 call-outs or shouts, as we call them, a year. Something
Right.
like that. So, you know, there's a lot goes on in the water out St Haven, a lot of dinghy sailing, paddle boarding, you know, creel fishing, anglers, and the nearest other lifeboats in Aberdeen to the north and Montrose to the south. So it's about 45 minutes for them to get to St Haven. And, you know, in the cold of the North Sea, you last 3 to 30 minutes. So we just need to have a lifeboat service in St Haven to pick people out the water.
Right. Right. So you've had a very varied career. So you actually studied law at university and became a
Yes.
lawyer.
You could say I was a jack of all trades, but master of none. So, no, I went to university really early, and I graduated when I was 20 and went into law. And, you know, law was great for me and enjoyed being a lawyer. It trains your mind. But I just didn't want to be a lawyer for all my days and then retire at age 65 or something, and then the day after fall flat on my back, wishing I'd done all the things that I wanted to do. So about 10 years ago, I said, enough, it's time for a change. And I just took a right angle turn in my life and just became a full-time author and sort of sea instructor.
Right. That's and you took up diving while you were still practicing law.
Yes, yeah, just in my first year. I took up diving when I was 20 or 21, something like that. And I think I'd been on holiday to Florida, and you know, I'd gone snorkeling with the barracudas and saw some sharks, but snorkeling you're always in the top. And I saw divers right down there, part of the action. I thought, oh, I want to do that. And when I came back from Florida, I just signed up for the local Scottish Sabbatical Club in Peterhead, and here I am all these years later.
That's you must have been absolutely dedicated to throw your body in the cold North Sea.
Well, remember, it was a long time ago, and it was in the days before dry suits had really entered UK diving. So real men still dived in wetsuits then. So my first 2 years of diving were in a 7mm wetsuit, which was badly fitting. And I had to put 2 T-shirts underneath my long johns to stop the water flushing continuously throughout. And then when you go to places like Scapa Flow and you dive to 35 meters, the 7mm of your wetsuit is compressed. It's paper thin by the time you're at 35 meters. And it was extremely cold. And I remember one pivotal dive out in Scapa Flow when I surfaced. I came out the boat and it was the usual black, overcast, leaden skies, wind and a bit of rain. And I was trying to pour my coffee from a thermos flask. I couldn't do it. And then I tried to drink my coffee. And of course, my lips were so numb that I burnt my lips. And I thought, no, I'm going to try these newfangled dry bags. And of course, it was the right way to go. And here we are.
Right. So what was the attraction of wrecks? I mean, how did you become sort of interested in wrecks?
Yeah, so I think like any diver, when you first start diving, it's amazing, the whole feeling of diving, the weightlessness, you're seeing fish and beautiful seascapes underwater. So for the first couple of years, it's magnificent. It's a voyage of discovery. But a lot of people after 2 years tend to branch off in a direction. So some people like underwater photography, some people like underwater videography. And for me, I went diving on a known smashed up shipwreck up against these cliffs where a big castle, ruined castle, sits on top of the cliffs. It was actually the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. It was that castle. So people had known about this smashed up wreck, but nobody knew about it. And, you know, put my lawyer's head on, I just started going through old newspaper records and doing stuff like that and doing some research. And I found details of the wreck in 1899, a newspaper report how the steamship in a fog had just come straight into the cliffs. And there was a ball going on at the castle, and all the people came out in their finery out of the castle in their dinner suits, looking down at this poor ship sinking right at the bottom of the cliffs. So I identified that wreck then in the early 80s. And I got quite a buzz out of that, just adding the history to the rusted pieces of metal. And it was that idea of finding out the story about shipwrecks that I really got into and I thought was the thing for me.
Right. Was there much to see or find?
It was just a flattened debris field with two big boilers stuck in the middle of it,
Right.
and lots of golf balls from the local golf courses about a mile down the coast. So all the golf balls got swept up with the current. So that, you know, so as wrecks go, it's not your truck lagoon, obviously, but it was just special to me because I put an identity to it, and I found out the story of it, and that's what was special.
Yeah. And of course, then what were you doing? You were using air. So all of your diving at that stage was...
Oh yeah, that was in my 7mm wetsuit with a single 12-litre tank in my back and a Fenzi ABLJ, which most people watching this won't remember. But it was an inflatable horse collar thing that you blew up. And you went like that. So yeah, that was then, because you had to go down a really steep path for about 200 feet a lot down the cliffs, and you really probably couldn't do it in a dry suit with all your weight, and you certainly couldn't do it in a rebreather now, because it's just too heavy. But then in a single tank and a wetsuit, it was easy to do.
It'd be the walk back up, I guess, was the...
Yeah. Remember, do exercise after a dive, but for us, no, we would scale a 200-foot cliff.
So what were your dives mostly sort of looking for wrecks then? So you were inspired to look for wrecks, or?
Yes, I was. From that moment on, my focus of diving became shipwrecks. And I don't really do scenic, just swimming around diving anymore. I'm always diving with a purpose to see a particular shipwreck or to, to understand more about it, to look at parts of a wreck I haven't seen before.
So what sort of depth were most of them that you were? Well,
in the early days, we were just diving, 20, 25 meters up to 35 meters, maybe 40 meters in scapa flow. But that was on a single tank then. People weren't using twin sets in the UK. Yeah. And basically, at 40 meters, you had something like 10 minutes on the bottom, and then you had to come up. So you were just seeing and touching it. And it was just so cold until dry suits come onto the scene. And really since about 1984, 85, it's just been a huge increase in the technology and the kit we're using. And it's just, you wouldn't recognize the diving, well, you would, given your age. A lot of people wouldn't really recognize the sort of diving that we're doing back then.
Yeah. And you had a few sort of exciting moments diving on air, I believe.
Well, so in the sort of late 80s, we all started, it was the genesis, I really think, of technical diving, because we started getting, using twin sets, and we started using deco reels, because we accepted we were going to go, into deco and have a reel, and we would drift with a current under a DSMB. So, so as the technology improved, we went deeper and deeper. And yeah, I mean, this is before Trimix, the sort of technical diving revolution, had started. And I call it the deep air era. But we were pushing up to the 50-meter depth for air. And then a lot of us are going beyond that on air. And in the early 90s, I was diving at 58, 60 meters on air in a current in 3-meter viz, pitch black. And I lost sight of the seabed, and being narcosed heavily, I actually thought I was having a buoyant ascent. I wasn't. I just, basically, I started doing an immediate ascent, and I cannot remember anything from 60 meters up to about 38 meters when the lights came back on. And I just stopped my ascent. And so that was the big fright that I got on air
That would have been certainly a wake-up call, wouldn't
Yeah,
it?
well, they say deep air kills, and
Yeah.
that was me, and I said, I'm never going to that depth in air again.
I think that's the thing about narcosis, isn't it? Everyone sort of blithely sort of spouts off that it affects different people in different ways on different days at different depths, etc. But I guess when you've experienced it as you have there, it becomes reality.
Yeah, no, it is. And, you can say I'm experienced, rough diver, I'm totally in control. But then when something happens, you're in this instant pit and things start to happen that you weren't expecting. I got tunnel vision, which I'd never had before. I don't know if you've had it,
Yeah.
but you're looking around and it all just closes in until you actually literally see a grey tunnel ahead of you. And I thought, oh, that's a bit scary. So yeah, we got all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
so I wouldn't do that. I actually went to 50 meters on air in Palau a few years ago just because I wanted to see something. And I got to 45 meters and it's lovely 200-foot visibility. But I realized, no, I'm getting quite narcosed here. And at 50 meters, I had that real floaty feeling again that you get. And I thought, oh, I haven't had this for a long time. So not for me again. I'm not doing that.
No. So what had happened? Trimix had already sort of made itself felt.
Yeah, well, I think it happened earlier in America and Florida with Billy Deans and all that leading the charge. But in the UK, it was 1995 that Trimix really opened up. And at that point, the British Tobacco Club hadn't adopted Trimix or Nitrox. And there was a lot of animated discussion within the BZAC about whether to accept it or not. So myself and my pal Ewan Rowell, we signed up to TDI. They were starting up a training system in the UK, and we were the first TDI Trimix divers to go through the course and pass out. Well, to pass, not pass out. So the TDI people wanted to see the written exams we'd done, so they could see how we'd responded to their questions, and they could tailor the questions to improve their written exam portion. So we qualified in 1995 as Trimix divers, and then that opened a whole new spectrum of diving to us.
And you were still sort of practicing law as well, sort of full time, I guess. At the
yes,
time.
I was, yeah. But we really embraced it. So I had my own dive boat, and we had our own band of technical divers that came through the ranks, probably about 10 of us. We called ourselves the Stonehaven Snorkelers, and we would be out every Saturday or Sunday. We would also do a midweek dive in an evening. So I'd be in my suit or in court dispensing justice to the poor people of Stonehaven. And then I'd throw off my gown and my suit, go careering down the harbour, get into my undersuit, and we'd go 10 miles out to sea and dive a shipwreck. It was good fun. Yeah.
What sort of depth were you then using? Then able to go?
Yeah, the thing about the coastline around our neck of the woods, northeast of Scotland, is that there are virtually no intact wrecks shallower than 50 meters. There's one, largely the Taurus, which is in 50 meters, but the top of it comes to 40 meters. So if you dive that in air, you're still on the borderline of what you should be doing with air. So suddenly when we got Trimix qualified, it opened a whole new vista, another 20 miles out to sea with countless new shipwrecks that had never been dived before. So I remember our first Trimix dive after we'd qualified, went up to Peterhead and dived this wreck in 60 meters of water. And of course, we thought this was really hardcore and very, very at the cutting edge, because we had this mindset you couldn't go beyond 50 meters. And our kit was still evolving then, and our chests were layered with whips for different things, with your buddy, your ABLJ, but also an independent redundancy wing in case the ABLJ failed or something, and each had a direct feed and torches and everything. And I remember going into this going down to this World War II shipwreck, and it was lovely 50-meter ambient visibility in the bottom. You could see the whole wreck, and I honestly felt I was so clear-headed. It was like walking in a park on a Sunday afternoon. It was just chalk and cheese to what we had before. And so just gradually over the years, we got deeper and deeper. 60 meters led on to 70 meters, to 80 meters, to 90 meters and beyond. I've never been beyond 100 meters, and I have no intention of doing that.
And presumably you were finding more and more sort of wrecks.
Yeah, well, the history to our piece of Scotland is that in World War II, obviously the Germans had taken over Norway, and we were only 200 miles away from Norway.
Yeah.
So the supply shipping from the British Empire, as it was, or from America and Canada, would come up and arrive on the west coast of the UK, and, for example, Oban, which was a deep water anchorage, and was too deep for German aerial mines. So they would form up in convoys then, and they would go up round the north of Scotland, past the Orkneys, and then they would fight their way down the east coast of Scotland to ports like Newcastle or London with vital war shipping. And all the while they were under attack by bombers from Norway. So it's called the Battle of the East Coast, but nobody knows about it now. So what the British had done is they'd set up a swept channel that was about half a mile wide. It eventually went from Orkney all the way to London. And on the outside of that was the Northern Mine Barrage. So 400,000 mines tethered to the seabed, a wall of mines going all the way up. And the swept channel itself was marked every half a mile by a buoy, and it was swept almost daily for mines. So it was quite a safe place for the ships to go for U-boat attack. The German U-boats just couldn't get in to attack shipping, but they were very vulnerable to bomber attack from Germany. And so you had all these ships moving up and down in convoy up past Stonehaven. And the Germans they might go across to bomb Glasgow or Oban shipping, and on their way back, if they saw a supply ship, they would just sink it. And a lot of these ships, it's not known where they were sunk. They were sunk with all hands, for example, or they couldn't put out a distress call, or the ship went on fire and then drifted for a day before finally sinking some way away. So a lot of these identities were not known or jumbled up. And basically, for the last 20 years, we've been exploring from sort of Fraserburgh, Peterhead, all the way down to Montrose, out to about 20 miles offshore. And we've been finding 3, 4, 5 virgin wrecks a year. When I say virgin wrecks, ones up.
There'd be a lot of research ahead of actually getting wet, presumably.
Yes, we invested in magnetometers and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. But
we just wouldn't go out and blithely just mow the lawn for no reason, because it's a vast area of sea out there.
Yeah.
So there would often be a PA in the chart, which means position approximate, or PD marked in the chart, position doubtful. So usually there'd be something within a mile or two of a mark like that on the chart. But other wreck symbols in the charts would have a line above them or below them. So it'd be WK for wreck, and a line above or below, and that would mean it's been surveyed or been wire swept.
Right.
And it's known to be clear. And if the Royal Navy had done something like that, then that was usually quite accurate. There'd be something within a few hundred meters of that. So you just go out and mow the lawn until you find it. Yeah.
So when you were still at open circuit here using Trimix, just back to that, you very kindly wrote a section for the Dining with Divers book that Simon and I compiled some years back, and the story that you told in it was an absolute ripper about the world's third largest whirlpool diving.
Oh, that way, yes, yeah.
And I read it again just a short while ago, just to refresh my memory of it. It was quite a harrowing story. Perhaps you'd care to tell that.
All right. So I'm not very brave, really, by nature. But one of my dive buddies, Ewan Ryle, was very friendly with a TV producer who had taught Ewan to dive back in the early days. And he had got a contract to do a film for Equinox, a TV series in the UK, about the whirlpools of the world. And the Corryvreckan Whirlpool between Jura and Scarba, which are islands on the west coast of Scotland, is the third largest whirlpool in the world. And so Ewan phoned up and said, "Hey Rod, do you want to dive the Corryvreckan Whirlpool?" And you know, you never say no when somebody says something like that. So yes, of course I will. So we put together a team of hardcore divers and we rendezvoused on the west coast of Scotland. And we did a shakedown dive in the Falls of Laura, which is, there's a bridge goes over these falls, which are renowned for a fierce tidal rip where the water bubbles and churns. And when you drift over, there's a 45-meter deep pit. And once you're in the current, there's nothing you can do. It's like a washing machine. You go, and you go straight down into this 45-meter pit and you get tumbled about and then you get spat out. So all good fun. So that was our shakedown dive, which is absolutely terrifying. So that night we went back to the hotel we're staying in, and thankfully the forecast was for a force 8 storm or gale the next day. And we were thinking, absolutely fantastic, this will never happen. So we stayed in the bar. We stayed in the bar until a bit later than we should have, about 1:30, I seem to remember, and had one or two more Guinness than we should have had. Just thinking, there's no way this is on, we can enjoy ourselves. So the next morning, we got up and the TV producer said, yeah, come on, it's on, go down the harbour. So we went down the harbour and he said, right, start getting kitted up. And I was convinced he just wanted to film the disappointment in our faces when we were eventually told it wasn't going ahead. So then the boat left the pier, and I was thinking, oh, so he's just going to film us turning and coming back. But no, the skipper knew a way, hugging the coastline of all these small islands to get out to the Gulf of Scarba, where the whirlpool is. So there was a lot of manly banter on the way out, but I tell you, when we turned into the Gulf of Scarba, it was the most doom-laden place I've ever experienced in my life. Silent, ominous, nothing moving. All the while were the seagulls crying overhead, and there was a lot of gallows
sailors.
Yeah, there was a lot of gallows humour, and then but that all died out as soon as we got there. And the current produces this standing wave. So for the people that don't know about the whirlpool, it's a 200-meter deep channel between the two islands, and just to one side there's this granite pinnacle that rises up to 40 meters under the seabed. So it's granite, so you've got the whole might of the Atlantic current coming between the two islands. It pushes up over the pinnacle and then falls down the other side. And that pushing up causes a standing wave. And we saw the standing wave, holy Toledo, we're in big trouble now. But the skipper was very cool. He said, look guys, this is going to settle down. You're going to have 10 minutes of slack water. I'm going to put you in about 100 meters up current of the buoy, which was on two great big railway girders. And you drift down at 3 knots, grab hold of the line, and then you'll have to fight your way down, but you'll get slack water on the top of the pinnacle for 10 minutes. But when you see the small crabs lock themselves in between the stones and the nooks and crannies like that, it's time to leave. So we dived down, and when we got to the pinnacle right enough, it was lovely. Swam around, went down over the site at 50 meters, ranged about, then came back up, and just on cue, all life just disappeared from the pinnacle, and all the little crabs went and did that. It was amazing, because they know they just get taken, 200 meters down to the bottom of the pinnacle if they don't do that. So the current, it was that somebody threw a big switch, so the current was going one way, and then it kind of just, you could feel it turning and then starting to run the other way. And so myself and Dave Haddon, who I was diving with, we swam to the edge of the pinnacle, and we just looked over down at the 200-meter chasm into the abyss. And then I was still open circuit, so I noticed my bubbles from my exhaust breathing out stopped, and they just were hanging around beside me, which was really disconcerting. And then they all start, and you just felt yourself being sucked over the side. So at that point, we just put, air into our suits, air into our BCDs, put up a bag and a reel, and we just stepped off the pinnacle over the abyss. And it was funny, I always describe it like being 1,000 invisible hands just sucking at you, trying to pull you down. But then after 5 minutes, we were out to the whirlpool, and it was just a normal free hanging deco.
You had to fin hard to
begin with, yeah.
escape?
I mean, you had to use everything you had.
Yeah.
Gas in your suit, your BCD, physically winching yourself up, and then finning as well to get a bit of leeway to get up.
God, the feeling you must have had when you surfaced.
I know.
Absolutely.
The feeling I had was I'm never going there again.
Yeah.
But actually, I did go there on a boat trip from the West Coast during lockdown, and the skipper took us out, and I said, I've actually dived here. And he said, you weren't in that program for Equinox about 10 years ago? He said, yes, I was. He said, one of the other divers was here just 2 days before. And then the skipper himself had just dived the Pinnacle the day before I was there. So after all these years, this little convergence of people who were involved in it.
Right.
Yeah.
And still on open circuit, you then went to, you had a bad experience on open circuit in Northern Ireland. What were you doing there?
So basically, the rebreathers started coming into our group about the late 90s. I can't remember the precise year. But being a canny Scot, I said, I'm not paying £5,000 for a rebreather. I'll just stick open circuit. So in about 2003, we went to Malin Head, which is fabulous. It's a technical diving wonderland. You've got 50, 100 meter ambient visibility. You've got all these amazing war wrecks from World War II and World War I. And the depth and the clarity of water seduces you. So I think basically all my pals by this stage were on rebreathers, and I was the one guy left in open circuit. And we were diving every day 70 meters. And the penultimate day, I dived twice to 75 meters open circuit in the same day, which wasn't smart, I know, but I'd been doing it for 8 years, and you know, touch wood, everything had gone fine. And I was always told thin guys don't bend. So I was going in that principle. So, and the last dive of the trip was on the Justicia, you know, White Star liner in 70 meters with a perfect dive, just 20 minutes in the bottom, flawless ascent. Deco meter said, everything's fine, get out the water now. Said, no, we'll do an extra 10 minutes of deco. It's the last dive, we don't want anything to happen. But within an hour of surfacing, half an hour to an hour, I felt a pain in one of my knees. And then it started to spread over my kneecap. Then the other kneecap started to get pain. And then I got pain in one elbow, and then a pain in the other elbow. And I started to get a bit fuzzy headed. So actually I lay down on my bunk, and it just came onto me like a train very quickly. So I really couldn't move my legs, just about probably 10%. So I remember putting my legs up on a shelf to try, you know, because you remember the bubbles would migrate upwards. And so after about 2 hours, I decided I'd try and go freshen up. And I tried to get off my bunk. It took 10 minutes to get off my bunk and tried to walk to the head. I got to the head and I was really unsteady on my feet, and I went back and lay down. So one of my buddies came along and said, are you okay, Rod? I said, no, I'm far from okay. And so what we did was we got he took his rebreather and he set it as an auction rebreather. I just went on to Pure O2 and got much, much better just by doing that, you know, pretty quickly. But I still ended up in the recompression chamber when I got back to, Scotland a few days later, because I wasn't right. My balance was still a bit off.
Right. Oh, so you got treatment in Scotland rather than Ireland? Yeah.
Well, I thought it was the last dive of the day, so I thought as I stepped off the boat, I thought I was okay, largely, and I got driven up the road. I wasn't driving, but I went into work as a lawyer the next morning, and I was sitting there at my desk, grumbling at clients, and I thought, no, I'm not right. I'm still not right. So I phoned the hyperbaric unit in Aberdeen, who I knew, and who were, you know, cutting edge knowledge.
Right.
And I talked to a consultant there, and he said, I told him my symptoms. He said, what have you been diving? I said, well, 70, 75 meters every day for a week, a couple of 75 meter dives in one day. And he said, oh, you better come in. And I said, well, I'll just jump in my car and come through, we can have a chat. He said, no, you've still got a neurological abnormality. You can't drive. You could lose control at any point. Well, that was quite a wake-up call. So I got driven through, and eventually they gave me a whole range of tests, but the test that got me was, they made me stand with my hands out like that, and then close my eyes and go up in one leg, and I actually fell over. So my balance was still shot. So they put me in the pot for 2 or 3 hours with some really unfortunate people who were getting hyperbaric treatment for medical illnesses. And when I came out 3 hours later, they did the same test like that, and I could stand and count to 20. So
Right.
even 3 days after the bend, getting treated made a huge difference to me.
Because they of course would be servicing the offshore industry,
Yeah,
the
that's
oil,
right.
Aberdeen.
Mhm.
What just back to the wreck itself, the Justitia. What was it? That's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. The Justitia is a White Star liner, even though she's got the name of a Cunard ship, because all the Cunard ships end in IA, like
Right.
Lusitania. That White Star liners end in ick, like Titanic, Britannic, are all White Star. But so the Justitia was Cunard, but the British government had requisitioned it, but they needed a crew, and the Britannic had just been sunk, in the Med. So her whole crew were available. So the crew of the Britannic were basically, were put on the Justitia, and even though she was a Cunard ship, she was allocated the White Star. So that's why she's a White Star liner. So she's basically, think, the Titanic, and that's the sort of ship she is. I can't remember how many boilers she had, something like 16 or more, but each boiler is the size of a small house.
Right.
It's a vast ship.
I've seen some of Barry McGill's sort of images taken of the thing. I mean, it's just bloody huge.
Yeah, the iconic shot is the bow of the Justitia, because it's like the Titanic. And if you've got a diver hanging beside that in a shot, like Barry McGill's extremely good with his photography. He's got some amazing shots of that.
You so after that experience, did that encourage you to go to rebreathers?
Yes, it did. For 6 weeks, I wasn't sure if I would continue diving or not.
Yeah.
Because I had such a fright with such a bad bend. But I was back playing football and golf and all that sort of stuff, and I knew I was okay. And I just decided, so I'm going to start, but I'm just going to take it easy, and I'll never tweak the dragon's tail again. Within a year or two, I'd got trained up for rebreather diving, which is much more beneficial to your body for the sort of deeper technical diving I'm doing. Yeah. And now I couldn't consider being an open circuit trimix diver again, particularly because of the cost of helium.
And you're still using the same rebreather, but different.
Yes, I am. It's a AP Vision Inspiration, and it's like your favorite broom, where I've renewed my bladders, everything was renewed, but it's still the same rebreather I had in 2005,
Oh, that would have been lovely. So back to the writing side, and obviously you're discovering and visiting all of these wrecks. What prompted you to start writing about them?
Well, as I said, I didn't want to be a lawyer for all my days.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think how I could do something different. As a first-time author, you kind of think it's going to bring, riches and happiness to you, but it doesn't, let me assure you that. So Scapa Flow, when I dived first there in the early 80s, there was literally nothing about actual diving the shipwrecks properly. And we went up, we had no idea what it was. We didn't know if it was a light cruiser or a battleship, if it's sitting upright or its side. And it was just, there was a complete dearth of information. So one night in 1989, I just sat bolt upright at 2 o'clock in the morning, scared the living daylights out of my wife. And with this idea, I'll write the book, because as a lawyer, you're good with writing and words and all that sort of stuff and research. So I thought, I'll write the book. And So I got given 6 months by a publisher to do it, which was completely ludicrous, to research the whole of Scapa Flow and write the book in 6 months. So I spent as much time as I could in Scapa Flow and as much time as I could writing when I came out of court for the day. And I got the book done in the 6 months, and it was published in 1990. And I did a complete rewrite of it for the 100th anniversary of the Scuttle in 2019. So we just kept the title, Dive Scapa Flow. Everything else is different inside. And all the rec illustrations have been redone. I've been dealing with a fantastic guy, Professor Chris Rowland at Dundee University. He's the head of the sort of School of Art there, and he's a specialist in 3D work and photogrammetry and stuff like that. Mm. And he gave me the rights to use his sort of 3D scans of the German ships on the seabed of Scapa Flow. So that's been a real addition to the book as well. And
you've done a lot of that, haven't you? The photogrammetry.
Well, it's been happening more and more since about 2016. When we went out and surveyed the wreck of HMS Hampshire off Northwest Orkney, that was the first time that photogrammetry had really been used or attempted on a deep water shipwreck.
That was the Explorers Club flag expedition, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. That was the first, and only at the moment, Explorers Club flagged expedition I've done. Basically, well, you'll know, of course, the Explorers Club give one of the 200 flags to any expedition that they consider to be of scientific or historic importance, you could say. And such is the importance of the wreck of HMS Hampshire that it was awarded this flag number 192, which it was a privilege to carry.
Why was that? Can you just explain about the Hampshire, its significance?
Well, the Hampshire is famous. It was an armoured cruiser, but it's famous because it was carrying Lord Kitchener and his staff and the Minister of Munitions and their staff from Scapa Flow up round the Norway, the North Cape, to the White Sea for a high-level secret diplomatic mission to meet the Russian ministers to discuss war efforts and war aims. And the Russians were very short of munitions and were demanding munitions from the British government, and that's why the Minister of Munitions went. But the Hampshire carrying Lord Kitchener was meant to go up the east coast of the Orkneys, but there was a bit of a gale blowing which had produced a northeast wind. So the conditions in the northeast were very poor, and there were German submarines reported operating on the east coast. So about 1.5 hours before the Hampshire departed, they changed the route to the west coast. So the Hampshire left with 2 destroyers, a screen, and went up the west coast of Orkney along a route that wasn't swept for mines. It was particularly rough there. The depression had moved overhead, so the wind back to the northwest, exactly the wrong thing, and the seas grew to a force 9. And as an old sea dog, you'll know that produces a 30-foot or 10-meter swell. So the 2 destroyers couldn't keep up. So the Hampshire went on, ploughing into 30-foot waves, only making 13 knots. Little knowing that a week before, a German submarine had laid 32 mines as part of German preparations for what became the Battle of Jutland, because the Germans knew that when they enticed Beatty and Jellicoe and the Grand Fleet at Scapa Flow, the fleet might go round this west coast route of Orkney. So the Germans had mined it with 32 mines. And the Hampshire went straight into 1, possibly 2 mines, and went down within 15 minutes with a loss of everyone except 12 people. So Lord Kitchener, for those people who aren't aware, was the British Secretary of State for War. It was like losing the second top person, the person in charge of the whole war effort, was killed on that particular ship. Wow. So that's why it's historically very important.
You've then covered other areas of the world. Truck Lagoon. You've written about that.
Yeah, there's a Johnny Cash song, "I've Been Everywhere, Man." I've been everywhere, man.
Where there's wrecks.
Yeah, so I fell in love with Truck Lagoon in 1990. I went there first, and I was still a single tank diver then. And I was blown away by Truck. Just so, there was hardly any penetration of the truck wrecks being done then. And I was happy just to swim around outside and look at these wonderful shipwrecks covered in coral and see sharks and all that. And I went to Palau at the same time. And I just loved the whole atmosphere out there. And I traveled around the Pacific and other places before that. So I started going back later on, and it was a lovely person who was the main dive guide, Cindy, in the truck stop, dive resort and hotel in Truck, who said, Rod, we could really do with another good book, up-to-date book about Truck Lagoon. And I thought, oh, it's a massive thing. But sitting on the plane going 36 hours back from Truck via Guam and Singapore and London, not to Aberdeen, I thought, oh, I maybe could do that. So I kind of started on the plane going back. I thought, yeah, I'm going to do this. So that was the first of, doing it. So it took a while. And there was 40 main shipwrecks I had to cover.
Yeah.
But that first edition came out about 2015. So I'm actually hard at work. I've illustrated 21 of the wrecks, but of course, a number of the wrecks have collapsed since you no sooner illustrate a wreck than it falls apart.
Yeah.
So I've had to re-illustrate a few of those wrecks and make corrections to others. And I'm getting another 3 or 4 wrecks illustrated, which weren't in the first edition. So I'm hard at work on that just now. It's great fun.
And your other book, the one that I find particularly appealing, was the Force Z, the shipwrecks of.
Yeah, well, we launched that, of course, at OzTech in 2013. I remember this lovely gentleman, grey-haired gentleman in the audience, eyes blazing with interest while I was giving my talk. And he came up to me afterwards. He was retired RAN Rear Admiral, and he'd been a midshipman on Repulse when it was sunk. And he was fascinated to hear about it, So yeah, of course, since that book came out, there's been terrible illegal salvage work.
I was going to say that would be absolutely awful, wouldn't it?
Oh, I find it personally disgusting.
Yeah,
what's happened, and I've seen footage. I haven't been back since, but I've seen footage, and it's hard to believe how much damage they've done to these wrecks.
Yeah. And it's not just the Repulse, the Prince of Wales. There's the Perth, the Exeter, all of these other ships, all the way through the region where the pirates have just pillaged.
No, I know. I saw there was an expedition to go and dive some of the shipwrecks in the Java Sea, the Dutch ones, the De Ruyter, and then when they actually went, some of the ships were completely gone, been lifted.
Yeah, there was just the depression in the seabed.
Yeah. But what troubles me is that these wrecks, some of these ships in World War II, when they went down, there was 1,000 people got killed in these wrecks, and their bones are still there. And there's terrible footage of where parts of Repulse and Prince of Wales have been taken ashore. I think it's in Malaysia or further north. And there's piles of scrap, and there's rumors of human remains just being taken out and thrown in a mass grave or something like that. It's disgusting.
That human element of shipwrecks, of course, you've been, well, I guess, fortunate in being able to help some of the living members of people that have died, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, if you don't, for non-divers, diving shipwrecks is, there's a lot of misinformation out there, but absolutely 100%, all the service personnel I've met who were on ships in World War II that got sunk and have come to me, they're all 100% behind their ships being mapped, surveyed, because it helps to keep the memory of what they went through alive. So, for example, when I was on the 2001 military trip to survey the Prince of Wales, the British battleship, sunk in the end of 1941, I was dealing with Ken Burns, who was the secretary of the Prince of Wales Survivors Association. And when I finally got the wreck illustrated, I got copies made for all the expedition members, but I also sent a copy to Ken. And he phoned me up when he got it, said, Rod, that was amazing, because when I opened up this illustration of the wreck, I called my wife through and kind of burst into tears and was able to point on the shipwreck, say, that's where I was serving, that's where the torpedo hit. and this is how my ship is now. So that was amazing. And the Prince of Wales Survivors Association had a reunion each year. There's none left now, sadly. And they always got an admiral to come along and speak at it. So they got me to get one of the prints framed, and I sent it down to them, and they presented it to the admiral at one of these Survivors Association reunions, which, I mean, I love all that. I think that's divers giving something back to service personnel.
You've done that quite a fair bit, haven't you? Well, there's been a few occasions when you've managed to help.
Absolutely, both civilians, and ex-service personnel. So there's one that which brought me the most joy, I would say, is the wreck of the SS Creamier. So it's a shipwreck that's about 15 miles offshore here. I'd known about it for a long time, but it was always too deep and too far offshore for the sort of kit we were using and the boats we had then. But enter the rebreather era, and our boats are better. And now we can get out there in an hour or something like that, which is incredible. So in 2010 or something like that, I took some divers out. We had the first ever dive in this wreck, and it was fabulous. And we understood how it sunk. And I had an online blog then. So I just posted 3 lines about it. And by mistake, I just did it quickly, and I got the tonnage wrong of the ship. So about 2 weeks later, I got this email, all in capitals in bright red. Dear Mr. MacDonald, my name is Noel Blacklock. I was the radio officer, the Royal Navy radio officer on the SS Creamier. I see you've been diving my old ship. By the way, you've got the tonnage wrong. It was XXXXX. But I'd very much like to find out about my old ship. So I got in touch with them and said, sorry, I got your tonnage wrong. So I told him what I could. And before I knew it, he and his wife were flying up to Aberdeen to come and meet me. So I said, well, I'll pick you up from the airport. How will I recognize you? And he said, don't worry, my wife and I will be the only 2 people in wheelchairs. And I said, well, look, I've got a big 4x4. Are you sure you'll be able to get up to it? He said, no problem, Mr. MacDonald. So anyway, the BA flight from London arrived, and here's 2 elderly people, about early 90s, being pushed by the BA staff in wheelchairs. So I walked up and said, Noel, and he stood up and said, Mr. MacDonald, I'm pleased to meet you. We don't really need these wheelchairs. It just makes traveling so much easier. And you saw the BA staff. That's the old Royal Navy. You know what it's like. So the Creamier had been going from the Firth of Forth round the north of Scotland to Nova Scotia to collect a war cargo. So there was 2 columns, and they were leading the port column, and there was the starboard column going up. So they got attacked by German bombers from Norway, as I mentioned earlier. And the vessel leading the starboard column, the Trebartha, was set on fire. And he detested the way that the German planes came in, they strafed the crew as they were getting into lifeboats. So anyway, his ship he was down below decks actually before the attack started in the mess, having some food. And he said there was this big kaboom and all lights went out and he was thrown to the ground. So he ran up to his cabin, got his life preserver, put it on back to front in his panic. And he rushed out to the back of the superstructure overlooking the aft deck with the 2 holes in the poop pile in the distance. And he said the whole of the aft deck was already underwater with just the barrel of the Dean's gun sticking out the water. And he's going, crikey, what do I do now? When something swung around, hit him in the back of the head, and he was knocked out. And he said he came to underwater with a ship just sinking right beside him. And he could have been snagged in anything. So he popped to the surface and just saw the bow of the ship with a bell. It sunk within 3 minutes because it was light. The cargo holds were empty. And a ship where the cargo holds are empty sinks very, very quickly because these are massive, the holds are massive swimming pools that flood with water. The ship goes down, there's no buoyancy. So he popped to the surface with his life preserver And he was in the water for about 45 minutes. And you could see the Trebartha was being strafed. You could see that. And then the attack was over and he was bobbing in the water, very, very cold in the North Sea. And suddenly this raft came along and he shouted to it. And there was 3 guys in this raft that pulled him into the raft and kept him warm. Then a big Dutch freighter, the Oberon, came along and picked them up and took them all to Aberdeen. So he lived and he was very grateful for the hospitality of the merchant seamen in Aberdeen who helped him so much and, you know, looked after him. So I wrote that chapter in The Darkness Below. And then about 9 months later, I got another email. Dear Mr. MacDonald, my name is Betty, I think it was Betty McGill. I am the daughter of a former crewman of the SS Creamier. I see you've written about his ship. He died in 1963 of natural causes when I was just 16. And like all the people who were in the war, he never talked about his experiences in the war then. And I never asked, I was too young. What can you tell me? And I said, oh, I can tell you a lot. I'm going to put you in touch with the last living survivor from the SS Creamier. So I put them in touch and they had developed a lovely relationship, and he sent all his wartime records to her. And it turned out that her father was one of the 3 people in the raft that pulled Noel Blacklock out of the North Sea and looked after him. Wow. I mean, that's just amazing. So imagine as a, you know, I guess she'd have been in her 60s then. Imagine meeting somebody who rescued your father in 1940 or 41. It's incredible, you know. Wow. So other people from that ship, relatives, other people that ship have been in touch. But so Noel and I developed this lovely relationship. I was delighted to say I had a 94-year-old friend. He was just great, you know, old school gent, Royal Navy, just the right stuff, you know. Yeah. So I was diving with Paul Haynes a couple of years later, I think 2013, and we dived and we were making the ascent. There was a few other divers with us and lovely visibility. And Paul noticed, I noticed Paul wouldn't come up from the folks on the ship. He was staying. So I signaled, come on, let's go. We're times we need to go. And he was making some signal. I didn't know what he was meaning. So anyway, he finally came up and I got to the surface. He said, I found the bell. And so I said, there's only one place that's going, because I'm not having, you know, another, you know, it just being taken off the wreck and ended up in somebody's garage. So the following week, we went back and we lifted the bell and Paul cleaned it up. And then I got hold of Noel and said, Noel, are you in next Saturday afternoon? We'll pop along. It'd be lovely to see you for a cup of tea. So Paul and I got up at 7 o'clock that morning. We left Stonehaven, driving downhill all the way to London, and checked into a hotel, and we drove along to see Noel and his lovely wife. So he took us in and said, Mr. MacDonald, would you like a cup of my nettle tea? I make it myself. And so we had a lovely time, and he showed us his medals. And then I said, Noel, I've got something for you. So I went out to my car and had a cover over it. I took it in and said, this is for you. And we gave him the bell of the Creamier. And can you imagine, he last saw that as the ship was sinking on Armistice Day, 1941. He saw the bell in the forecastle. And here he is after all these years getting it presented to him.
That would have been so stunning.
Yeah, it was. And we noticed as well when we were talking to him that there was a 7.7 millimeter bullet dink in the bell. So we set the bell up. So it was attacked from the port side. And the bullet dink was on the port side. So we know that the German plane was actually strafing us. After it dropped its aerial torpedo, it was strafing the ship as well.
Wow. So we're getting close to the end of the time. What are your most recent projects? How many books have you written now, right?
I've got 11 just now. So I'm writing an updated second edition of Dive Truck Lagoon. Right. And I've got another book coming out, which is non-diving, but it's about Task Force 58 and the story of how all these shipwrecks at Truck and Plough came to be on the seabed. So that's going to be my big one next September. Right. So aimed not just at divers, but about military historians and people interested in World War II and the Pacific. So that's next September. It should publish. It's written. We're just starting to go through the edit process.
That'd be boy, you've been very prolific.
I know, I don't know why, but I just like doing it, you know. I just,
mate, thank you so much for joining me. It's been really, really good to sort of chat with you again. I do look forward to your next visit to this side of the world. And I do have to say, Nora's waiting to wave us goodbye. Mate, get out there in the snow next weekend and enjoy your skiing.
yeah, I will.
But it was good. Thanks so much, Rod.
It's been lovely, Strikey. I don't know about you, but I've had a laugh anyway.
Mate, I'll speak to you later.
Okay,
Nora,
thanks so much. Okay,
thank you, Nora.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you so much, Rod, for a very lovely sharing of stories with regards to shipwrecking and all your experience. Very nice and poignant to me, I feel. It's quite nice. Thank you so much. And I'm sure the ADEX community enjoyed it a lot also. We'd like to say thank you to David Strike as well for arranging this for us. And we look forward to more of In Conversation with Strikey.
It's next time it's Yvonne Press from Bali, I think is next. Yes, Yvonne. And then Randy Thornton from the USA. So there's a few more to look forward to. But Nora, thank you. Rod, once again, thank you, mate. And speak again soon.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.